Another week. Hello, good afternoon. Welcome to the marketplace. Coming up this afternoon, Metro Mass Transit workers call off their strike this morning, but the transport operator is in financial trouble. We'll hear from its deputy managing director. Also coming up, Chamber of Petroleum Consumers pushing for subsidized petroleum scheme for commercial transport operators. We'll speak with the executive secretary. And we will be talking scaling up your business despite the COVID-19 crisis. I'll be speaking with co-founders of Scale Up. Thanks for being with us this afternoon. We've got details right after this break. Welcome back to the marketplace. We begin for the Ashanti region, where we understand Metro Mass Transit workers over there have called off their strike this morning. The workers were protesting unpaid salaries. We can get the latest from Nana Sensu-Mensah, who has been following talks between management and workers. Nana, tell us more. What consensus has been reached?
Yes, Dario. Not long ago, the aggrieved workers and the management, specifically delegation from the Labour Union, the Trade Union Congress, and the management of the Metro Mass Transit, they've been in talks for, let's say, 3 hours. After the closed-door meeting, they reached consensus. And what they have agreed on is that their outstanding salaries will be paid to them in full by before 13th of this month, close of business that specific day. So they have assured the aggrieved workers that their outstanding arrears will be paid to them, and then they have actually begged them to resume their post for at least for the sake of the stranded commuters and passengers who have been at the yard over the weekend. So for now, they have the workers who laid their tools have now resumed their post. And before I was leaving the yard, buses were tripping in gradually to convey the commuters from the yard to their various destinations. So for now, the picture is that the aggrieved workers have now come to a consensus with the management, and they've agreed to resume work. Dario.
Okay, so earlier you spoke with the deputy managing director of the Metro Mass Transit, Richard Osei-Banfo. Let's take a listen to him talk about the company's financial troubles. Then I'll come back to you. He has been talking to us about that. The deputy managing director of Metro Mass Transit. You explained for us, so what he told you earlier in that interview he granted you.
Yeah, he told me earlier that there are over 3,000 workers within the Metro Mass, system would have been laid off if it were to be a private entity because of the COVID-19 that has really, derailed their financial status. So they are actually in financial turmoil as it stands. So that has actually led to the delay in the payment of the workers' salary. So I also asked him about the grounded vehicles, the numerous grounded vehicles at the yard. What is his comment on it? And then he told me that it's due to PPA. They have been partnering with other entities, so they outsource almost all the stuff that they buy, including the spare parts and other stuff. So that's somehow delay their procurement. So he was in talks with the aggrieved workers. He was part of the meeting. And then he told me that what he has to say is that he pleads with the workers to actually resume their post because, the Metro Mass is a non-profit making entity. So the least profit that they make from their activities is what they gain, and then, use some to pay the workers. So if they sit aloof without resuming their post, it will be difficult for them to, sort the workers out. So he actually pleaded for the workers that they should listen to him and then agree to him so that they will return to their post and ensure that, especially for the sake of the stranded commuters, they should resume their post. So this was the engagement that he had with me earlier in the yard. And then I also asked him that, what about the grounded vehicle? Do they have plans to auction some of the vehicles that are outmoded? Then he told me that they have plans to auction almost all the vehicles that are, are not in good standing to be on our street. So they are in talks with other agencies to ensure that they lay off all those vehicles that are not deemed for road,
Okay.
and then they ensure that the yard is cleared.
Okay. I think we can listen to bits of what he told you earlier when you spoke to him.
There's nothing that cannot be resolved. They understand the situation in which we find ourselves. So it's not like we have decided not to heed to what they are saying. They understand that we are a social intervention. We are not even a company that's meant to make profits. As long as we break even, we're able to pay our salary, we're able to pay for parts, and be able to take care of petty issues. So they would not, they are not going to, we wouldn't say we wouldn't pay them simply because, or sideline them and go hire people simply because they have refused to work. I can assure you that before the end of today, they are going to go back to work. I can assure you.
Some of their concerns were that, one, their glycol, their tier 1, tier 2 have not been sorted out for a couple of months now. Also, they also told me that some of the buses are grounded with some minor faults which need some few cities to be, bring them back on the streets. What do you have to say to that?
It's not, it's an issue, just like you said. I mean, our priority is to be able to pay for salary. Looking at our workforce, we have almost 2,900, close to 3,000 employees. And if you look at the number of buses we are routing now, our priority would be focused on paying for salary. Anything else we may have to put on hold, because if we decide we want to use everything to go pay for to pay our people rather than pay for parts rather than using it to pay salary, this is the situation that we find ourselves. A company that used to generate over 200,000 cedis a day is currently doing about less than 4,000 cedis. And like you said, it may look like it's minor. It may be fan belts, it may be brakes, it may be ties, but you should understand that as a company, we are under PPA. So somebody supplied you something, you haven't been able to pay them, yet you expect them to supply more. So this is the situation in which we find ourselves. If at the moment, let's say someone supplied you 1 million cedis worth of stuff, you've not been able to pay them, yet you need about 50,000 to move buses. Okay. Are you going to take that 50,000 to that person, or you are going to buy? If you decide to go and buy, that person has every right to take you on because you have some money to pay for stuff cash. But then if you give that person 50,000, that person is not willing to supply more because he needs more than that 50,000 to be able to supply you.
And that was Deputy Manager there at Metro Mass Transit speaking to Nana Senso earlier. We'll leave that conversation there, Nana. We just see how they are going to try to deal with their financial troubles and at the same time pay workers. But the latest there is that workers of Metro Mass Transit in the Ashanti region have returned to work upon consensus with management of that company. Let's move on now. The Chamber of Petroleum Consumers Ghana is pushing for a subsidized petroleum scheme specifically targeted at commercial transport operators. According to the chamber, this could be the surest way of dealing with the concerns of drivers about the transport fares whilst not reversing to social distancing directives. We are speaking with next with Duncan Amma, who is Executive Secretary of the chamber. He joins us with his thoughts on that. We'll speak about the scheme that you're talking about, Duncan. But first, your thoughts on the concerns of drivers about having to increase their fares because of social distancing protocols?
Good afternoon, Daryl. It's difficult to, at this point, take issue with these drivers for the prevailing conditions. Mind you, we are not in very normal times. And one of the worst affected groups as far as this COVID and its protocols are concerned happens to be our public transport operators. If you recall, we have kicked in a certain directive that says social distancing must be observed even in public transportation. So what that means is that they wouldn't exactly be able to get the standard number of passengers that they ordinarily would have done per trip. And once you are not getting the number of passengers that you would have done per trip, it means that the revenue you would have made per trip also dips. And per the numbers we have seen with them, most are losing almost 40% of the regular revenues that they ordinarily would have gotten but for COVID. And so whilst you have a situation where their revenues have dipped, we are also increasing fuel prices gradually against them. If you recall, not too long ago, you had a situation where we saw fuel prices go up by 8.3%. It's gone up by about 4.6 thereabout. It's gone up just a day or two, another 3.89%. So if you put these together, there is cumulative hardship, particularly on those with public transport or the trotro guys, if you call them so. Whilst they are not making enough money, we are also increasing fuel prices. So it is quite difficult to argue that they do not deserve any upward adjustment in fares. But Darryl, we are also mindful of the implications of adjusting transport fares. Once you adjust transport fares, you are putting a lot of pressure in the system on the market women, on the teacher, on the nurse, on everybody who goes out there day in, day out to do their work. And so there will be a cascading effect on everything within the economy. And we are saying that we can prevent that situation where you now leave these drivers with no option but to go and increase fares just so as to be able to sustain their day-to-day operations, because the cost of fuel has gone up, yet their revenues cannot be anything to take home because of the advent of social distancing in these cars. One would ask, do we allow them to just increase transport fares, which will probably sustain them, and which would also end up making even the cost of food for the average Ghanaian quite more expensive than it currently is? Right. Or we find a mitigating measure in order that they stay where they are, the state is able to support them, then the commuters are not overburdened due to the prevailing conditions.
So that
like
brings us to,
we are not in normal times.
Yeah, that brings us to your suggestion of a subsidized petroleum scheme for these commercial transport operators. Explain.
Darryl, if you do take a look at the transport sector, a lot of these commercial transport operators operate with what you would call the vehicle income tax sticker. What it means is that they also contribute largely to our tax net. And those who work under proper regulation, they are known. The database exists with the unions. If you did call the VVIP guys, they will tell you how many buses, how many fleet they operate at a time, how much fuel they consume at a time. If you speak to GPRTU, they'll be able to give you a fair idea how many numbers they are looking at for their membership, because they do take dues from them. We are saying that the state should intervene at this point, provide a certain fuel subsidy to these commercial transport operators. Now, how do you go about this? You can provide them with a cheat system, such that anytime he goes to buy fuel to say 50 Ghana cedis, the state says, I'm going to give you 10%, intervention or 5 cedis. And so anytime they buy fuel, there is some reduction that they get. Then at the end of the accounting month, the government could sit with the fuel companies and do the maths. Now, to also ensure the system is not abused, we may have to put in a few, security measures to ensure that the cards we give them cannot be duplicated, and the fuel stations are not going to be in a position to just duplicate it and go overcharge government for whatever these drivers have used. Okay. So we need to put a measure in place. If the government also believes that, well, if we found, let's say, 10 million Ghana cedis, 20 million Ghana cedis, and gave to the various unions, their memberships will be able to get something small to sustain or augment their fuel purchases. That would also be another way. But whatever it is, we need to find a certain mechanism to reach out to these drivers in order that we do not sit and allow them just to increase transport fares for everybody, which will have a cascading effect on the general cost of living for every Ghanaian.
We'll have to leave it here. Thanks so much indeed, Duncan Amwa. He's Executive Secretary of COPEC, speaking there to us. Now, let's turn to other news. The Majority Leader, Osei Mensah Bonsu, is this week expected to firm up media review presentation date with Finance Minister Ken Ofori-Atta. The two would have to agree on the date, even though the presentation would be carried out by the Finance Minister. Now, sources say Parliament had initially proposed a 3rd of this month. However, this meeting would give a specific date. The Finance Minister is expected to use the presentation to announce a fresh package that would help stabilize the economy in the midst of COVID-19. Well, meanwhile, economist Godfrey Aboagye-Wiafe says government's interventions so far in managing the economic impact of the pandemic have been satisfactory. He spoke to Nshirado on Joy Prime's morning show, Prime Morning.
I am very hopeful. And the reason I say so is that this is not an isolated case. We are not in this alone as a country. Across the world, you see the challenges. To that extent, it gives hope that we are all working together to come out of this. So I'm very hopeful. So far, I think in terms of the interventions, they are satisfactory largely. There isn't a lot of data to assess other interventions to see how efficient we have been. But I think overall, as a country, we have made good progress in how we are navigating ourselves through these challenges. But in the last couple of weeks, because of the political business cycle, the political activity, it looks like it is overshadowing the health concerns, and therefore we are losing the balance in our approach towards containing or managing COVID-19 and the economy.
To renegotiate loans and stay liquid or look out for other investment options, small and medium enterprises have to survive during these times of the COVID-19 pandemic. So how can they do so and even attempt to scale up during these times? We can now speak with Amajampo and Olivia Isiedu-Into, both with Scale Up. Great to have you on our program this afternoon. So let's begin with what Scale Up is. Anyone?
Hi, Daryl. Good afternoon, everyone. So Scale Up Africa is a convener of ecosystem players across Africa and the diaspora. So we're really looking to provide more qualitative support to SMEs to enable them to grow. As an angel investor and working with other investors in the ecosystem, the support that we are getting for SMEs isn't quite fit for purpose. We're not seeing the job creation. We're not seeing the growth metrics that we need to see for investment to properly come into the sector. So we are really looking to support SMEs with corporations and foundations to enable us to run, corporate-sponsored entrepreneurship training and development programs. We're also a convener of ecosystem players, as I said, and so we have a festival coming up, the Small Business Festival, which will hope to showcase some of our talent, our technology, and opportunities in the ecosystem.
So. Interesting that we are talking about scale up during these times. I don't think it's something anybody wants to say during these times of the pandemic, but I've also heard that it's during a crisis that it is perhaps the best time to plan ahead for the future. I don't know if you believe in that philosophy, but why should we be talking about scaling up during these times?
Actually, I think one thing that you touched on briefly is the fact that there's been companies or organizations that have been able to grow and even thrive during a recession. So you take an example of a brand like Netflix or even Uber or even the online platform where you're able to rent places for a short period of time, Airbnb. And it's purely because they need to tap into the purpose of what is currently happening around them. And it's not necessarily just about sort of making money, but it's understanding what the purpose of your business is and what you're trying to achieve and what you're trying to help your consumers, achieve. So it's looking at ways and means that you're able to tap into that. Because I think a lot of people go into business where they're thinking they want to make money, which is, completely understandable. But also there needs to be an understanding of what is the true purpose of what you're trying to achieve. Why should somebody buy into your service? And I think now is the time for brands and big companies or SMEs to start tapping into how they're able to pivot and re-strategize. but understanding that they are working towards one, purposeful goal of just showing their human side and just showing to consumers that we're in this with you, we're in this situation with you. And so trying to figure out how they can pivot and re-strategize to work alongside what their stakeholders currently need.
And talk about re-strategizing. What are the options they can be looking at?
Yeah, I think it's really important for SMEs to understand their core purpose, why they are doing what they're doing, what problem they are solving. And so having time like this, pandemic times, to really critically think about that with your product and your market, how do they actually fit together in a strategic way? Everyone's talking about how we've accelerated digital just in a couple of months, something that would have taken 2 years before the pandemic. And so this is a great time for people to take that time to go through the strategizing process and realign their businesses for the future, because everyone's talking about building back better. Corporations have a massive role to play in terms of environmental, social, governance issues. And so for us, it's about really nurturing that relationship with big business to help small business. And that's really the engine of growth and where the jobs and economic growth opportunities lie. So that's what we're here for.
Okay, and so you talk about positioning small businesses to connect with big businesses. During these times, people are looking at whether or not they should, consider investors and all of that. What do you advise?
Investors are looking for growth. At the end of the day, this is a troubling time for everybody economically, globally. It's a challenge. Everywhere the debate is shifting towards, Black Lives Matter, economic equity. We import far too much as a continent, as everyone knows. So these are all opportunities for us to look more local. These are all part of the conversation that investors are having, and they're looking for more localized companies in terms of supply chain, procurement opportunities to improve the quality and consistency of SMEs' performance, improving their productivity. Digitalization, of course, is a massive drive in terms of having tech as your underbelly as a business to enable you to scale up. Okay. And these are all indicators that investors are constantly looking for and searching for. And even as we speak, deals are being done by investors. So it's not like nothing's happening. Things are happening. It's just that you need to, as a business owner, know what your strategic plans are, how you're going to plug into the opportunities, and how you're going to prepare for this.
Okay, in just under 1 minute, if you can, so how do people connect with you if they need advice? What can they do?
They can actually reach out to us via our website and all of our social media platforms. So our website is wearescaleupafrica.com. All the information in terms of our service and what we do, and also about the actual festival that we're running on the 6th of August, they're able to tap into our social media platforms on Twitter, LinkedIn, YouTube, and Facebook. And it's all, the handle is Scale Up Africa. So they can reach out to us on those platforms. Our email addresses are all kind of on there for them to be able to get in touch with us.
And there'll be lots of workshops and interactive sessions for them to also go through the motions of preparing their businesses for the next stage of building back better.
All right. Thank you so much, ladies. And that's the Marketplace this afternoon. My name is Darryl Kwao. The election brief is up next.